Okay. Oh, there yeah, I could never live up to that introduction. So I'm going, who is that guy? I'm thrilled to be here. I've really. This is my second time here, but already I have a great fondness for Greg and Melissa and what's going on here, and yeah. There's a genuineness about them that I don't always see. Sometimes we preachers, we feel like we have to put on our glory face and make everybody think our life is perfect. So they want to. It's like, if you want to get deeper into God, believe your life is perfect, and you'll go deeper in God. But the reality is the deeper in God you get, the enemy doesn't just step back and go, "Oh, you're anointed now." Man, okay, demons back off. He's anointed, so. No, the opposite is true. As you get deeper into the Lord, the enemy raises up a battle, and he plays right into God's hands because it makes you stronger. And the enemy, I don't know, you'd think after a few millennia he would recognize this. That if I attack God's people, it makes them stronger. But he didn't get it at the beginning, and I don't think he's going to get it at the end either. So this is how it works. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very impressed with your pastors, and on multiple levels, I'll leave it at that. Some of you may know that we're beginning I'm actually beginning a TV program. We're waiting on Daystar to give us the final date, but it looks like we'll be in October. And the program is called Dreams and Mysteries. So think in terms of Indiana Jones goes out to his journeys, and he discovers a mystery of the Bible. And he brings that mystery back to his classroom warehouse library. And from that warehouse library, he's teaching his class what the mystery he discovered in there. So we'll be talking about, we already filmed the first season, and one of the topics is time. And how does time work? And where is God in time, or is he in time? And justice, and how does God's justice work for us? And why can we expect God's justice to work? The mystery of, like talked a little bit last night, the mystery of prophets and psychics, and what's the differentiation between those two, and the law of attraction, and there's difference between God's law of attraction and the New Age law of attraction, and how does that work? Did you know that everything in God's kingdom works by creating a negative charge to attract 2 or more positive charges? Everything. Let me just this is not my message, but if you give me like 2 minutes and 18 seconds. God created into creation the atom. The very fabric of creation is the atomic structure. When I was standing in the throne room on May 12, 1995, I was standing there about 8 feet from the throne, and all the whirling going on around me, angels rotating around the throne of God, and I'm thinking, I am standing in the nucleus of an atom. The throne room is literally like the nucleus of an atom. And then it's interesting because in the nucleus there are 3 protons: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's interesting how that works, isn't it? So everything is made up of this atomic structure. God says, and Paul says in Romans 1, all of creation speaks about him, and we are without excuse. Now, whether you go to the smallest thing that the eye can't see except through an electron microscope, or you go to the largest thing that is so far away we don't even know that there are suns out there 100,000 times bigger than our sun. I mean, it's huge, from the largest to the smallest. God has created this thing called a negative and positive charge. It doesn't mean value. Negative is not a value statement. It's a charge statement. And so your clothes are held together, for example, and you're glad they are. But your clothes are held together because an atom created a negative charge that attracted a positive charge, and that's what causes the fabric to stay. The thread to stay together. The chair you're sitting on to hold you up. The paper you write on to receive the ink. Because a negative charge attracted two or more positive charges. It's that way in all of creation. It's built in the fabric of heaven, and it works that way. And how does that work? Because whenever I give, I create a negative charge that attracts positive charges to me. In fact, everything in the Bible is about this. The Beatitudes is that. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall receive. Blessed are those. You give away mercy, you receive mercy. Everything in the Bible is about you humble yourself, God exalts you. Everything is create a negative charge, God will give you more. Job 42:10. Job has gone through, 41 chapters of illness, however long that took. 41 chapters of illness. He's been praying for himself, beseeching God for himself. Then he realizes in Job 42:10, it says this, and God acted on the behalf of Job when Job prayed for his friends. Job created a negative charge. I'm going to quit praying for me. I'm going to pray for my friends. And guess what? God says, really? I'll act on your behalf. You give away something God brings to you. So the law of sowing and reaping is part of that negative charge. The seed faith. Yes, it's true. But here, let me give you a little hint, though. For example, Jesus said, when you fast, don't shout it from the rooftop. Don't disfigure your face like the Pharisees do, for they have received the reward. What does that mean? It means this. I created a negative, but I just got my positive because I let people know what I was doing, and they said, "Oh, look at the guy, he's fasting." So I zeroed myself out. I zeroed myself out. I gave my own positive. And God did that. So now God says, well, you got your reward. So don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. That's what the idea is. Don't let anybody know, because here's the deal. You may give yourself a one-for-one reward. I gave this, I get this. And everybody goes, oh, really good. God says, but I would give you 2 for 1. In fact, there's cases where I'll give you 7 for 1. 7 times what the cankerworm ate. 7 times what the palmer worm ate. 7 times what the thief stole. I'll give you 7 times. You want to be satisfied for 1? 1 for 1 exchange? The minimum I give is 2 for 1 exchange. So this law of attraction built into the very fabric of creation. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Whenever God asks you to fast or pray or give or humble yourself or apologize or forgive. See, forgiveness is not something that you have to do. I mean, in this respect, if you do it, you create a negative charge that God will bless you. They hurt you, but you forgave them. That creates this negative charge. And God says, oh, then I'm going to give you positive. Now, I'm keeping it in earthly terms. That's kind of Paul used that same. I'm speaking to you in earthly terms. So I'm doing it, but the heavenly application of this is so important to the quality of life you live. The quality of life you live. Anytime, well, I'm going to get to preaching, so just remember that, okay? So if you would, turn in your Bibles with me to 1 Samuel chapter 27. 1 Samuel chapter 27. And we're going to begin reading an account of an incredible man named David. You know, to everything there's a story. To everything there's a story. The story of David is spectacular. And so this interchange of the story of David, as David rises up and Saul is king, and Saul, the story of Saul is kind of interesting in its own right, and but there's a story. And there's a time and a season to everything under heaven. A time to live, a time to die, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to reap, a time to sow. There's a time for everything. And in that timing, God puts us places. He knows when we're going to be best suited and utilized. God in his all-knowing omniscience looked ahead in all of creation and decided when would be the best time for you to be on earth. You see, he always knew you were coming, because if he didn't, that means he would not be omniscient, all-knowing. So if he always knew when you were coming, then he probably, it makes logical sense to think, if he knew when you were coming, he chose when you would be here. God in heaven isn't going, where's the worst time I could put Melissa on the face of the earth? The worst time, listen, where's the worst time? For she is sure to fail. No, this incredible God that we serve says, when is the most opportune time? I've designed you to be the most influential and to change the most people's lives in an era where it is most needed. And he, in your design, put you here right now. That's what I did with David and Saul. And sometimes we choose higher roads or lower roads, greater roads, lesser roads. But let me take just a look at a real quick overview of this time change between Saul and David. So Samuel anointed Saul to be king at around 1047 BC, 1,047 years before Jesus. Saul was about 30 years of age. When they looked to find him, they found him hiding in the baggage. Here the guy is going to be king, and he was too afraid of the people. So he hid in the baggage. And we see this flaw in Saul eventually cost him his life. So this flaw was discovered, and he was hiding because he was afraid the people would not want him to be king. After only 1 year of being king, Saul violated God's authority structure and the separation between the priest and the king because he offered burnt offerings that only the priest was allowed to do. Why did he offer those? Because the people became restless waiting for Samuel. And so Saul decided he would burn the offering. He didn't realize this was a test for the legacy of his kingdom. So he failed to wait on Samuel, and he offered burnt offerings to God. Once again, the pressure of the people became too great for him to handle. Because of this, when Samuel came, Samuel told him that his kingdom would not continue, in other words, would not be passed on to his sons. Because the idea was, king would be the king, and he would have a firstborn son. The firstborn son would raise up and become the king, the next king. But because of what he did with violating the authority structure, his first son, Jonathan, would not become king. 9 years later, this weakness of fearing the people would surface again. Once again, Saul failed to realize this was a test. The test was, kill everything. When you come into the country, kill everything, including its king, and the king was named Agag. Instead, Saul wanted to show the people how great he was. He brought Agag back, but he hadn't killed him, and he hadn't killed all the sheep or the animals as God instructed. For this, the kingdom would be taken from Saul, the Spirit of the Lord would depart from him, and the distressing spirit would trouble Saul for the remaining 32 years of his kingdom. For 32 more years, this would go on. Interestingly enough, at the very same time the kingdom was taken from Saul, a baby was born. That baby's name was David. 17 years of this troubling spirit on Saul. 17 years later, David would have already killed with his bare hands a lion and a bear. A little David, like this tall, way smaller than his brothers, way, way smaller than his brothers, had already killed a lion and a bear. Samuel finds him. David's 17 years old. Samuel anoints him for the first time to be king. Shortly thereafter, while he was still 17, he would kill Goliath. When he was 17, he would begin to play the harp for Saul. It would be 13 more years before David would become king. 8 years later, when David was 25, Samuel will anoint him again to be king for the second time. Samuel would die 3 years later at the age of 110. David is 28 when Samuel dies. Saul is 69. David would become king in Hebron at about 1011 BC at 30 years of age. He would spend 7 years in Hebron. He would be 37 when he became king in Jerusalem. He would reign as king in Jerusalem for 33 years, a total of 40 years as king. David would die when he was 70 years old. Incredible story. But what we may not realize is that for every story, there's a story behind the story. And there's a story behind the story here. There's a critical moment of time. A critical moment of time. In fact, a critical moment of time that boiled down to a 24-hour period in the life of the life of David and Saul that is absolutely stunning. We have critical moments of times in our lives. Moments where we make choices that we have no idea what the choice is going to end up doing in our lives. Moments where we feel like we have no choice, but we do have a choice. But in God, in order to do what God's telling us to do, we don't have a choice. And David was going to face one of those moments, and Saul was going to face one of those moments, both in the same 24-hour period. So let's back up a little bit. 1 Samuel 27 begins with David lamenting, thinking Saul's going to kill him, because David has just refused to kill Saul for the second time. First time, Saul was in a cave, and David cut off a tassel. This time, Saul's asleep. In fact, the whole camp is asleep. The guards are asleep. David goes down into the camp, takes the pitcher of water that's by Saul's head as he's sleeping, and his spear beside Saul's head while he's sleeping. He could have run him through with the spear. Instead, David takes it. He goes up on the hill just outside the camp, shouts back at Saul, "I could have killed you. Why are you trying to kill me? I'm not after you. I could have killed you in the cave. I could have killed you now. I'm not after your life. What are you doing?" Saul repents again for trying to kill him. But David's not convinced because Saul has already said that before. David lamenting. And it starts off in this passage. It said, "And David said in his heart, now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul." So what does David do? David decides, well, I'm going to run away. My brothers hate me. Israel hates me. Saul hates me. He's tried to kill me numerous times. I'm going to run away. And where am I going to go? Well, I'm going to go deeper into the land of the Philistines. And so he goes deeper into the lands of Philistines, and he meets a man named Achish. Achish is a son of a king, the king Moak. Great name. How many of us have named our children Moak? So the son of a king, King Moak. David finds favor with this king, with this Philistine general, Achish. And he's growing. David's attracted 600 men to himself, plus women and children. And so he's got all these people around, and he says to Achish, he said, look, I've served you, but I need a place for my people. And Achish says, I'm going to give you this town, Ziklag. Now, where was Ziklag? Ziklag was halfway between Beersheba and Gaza. So southern part of Israel, we would know today. And from Ziklag, David began to grow. And he began to go out and do raiding parties in the Philistine towns and taking away all the sheep and the gold and the clothing, etc. And he began to accumulate a lot of wealth. And he served Achish well. He took care of Achish's flocks and so on, and protected Achish. And Achish was very, very happy. A year and 4 months goes by, the Bible tells us. A year and 4 months go by, and we're approaching the critical moment. Saul is gathering his armies, and the Philistines are gathering their armies, and something's about to happen. On the very same day, David is approached by Kish and says, Kish says to David, we're going to war with Israel. Surely you know you are going to war with us to fight against your people. And David goes, I know. On that same day, Saul says to his courtiers, says, go out and find me a witch, a woman. And it says something strange here that we kind of take for granted. It says in chapter 28, verse 6, it says this, and Saul inquired of the Lord, and when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Now isn't that interesting? It was expected that when the king would inquire of God, God would give him a dream. Today, no one thinks that. Why? And if you think dreams are strange, try the Urim. One of the two stones in the pouch of the high priest that would light up whenever God was speaking. That's strange. Not to mention the stone on the breastplate that would light up corresponding to the Urim. And then there's a Thummim, and that gets even stranger. And so God wasn't talking to Saul anymore. And so Saul says, go out and find a witch. Where did they go? They went to a town called Endor, because all the witches had migrated to Endor because Saul had cast them out of Jerusalem. Why? So the question goes, why? See, when I read the Bible, I love asking, why did they go to Endor? Why this and not that? Some of you that have taken the courses that have been offered here that I've written know this idea of contrasting. You find out answers in the Bible or dreams, etc., by contrasting why this and not that. Why Endor and not Beersheba? Well, Endor was a small town in the northern part of Israel. It was about 15, 20 miles northwest of the Sea of Galilee, up towards Lebanon. And they had migrated there because they felt safe. But they also migrated for an even more important reason, and that's this. Endor was a town in the tribal territory of Issachar. Issachar. Oh, so what? Well, see, Issachar was a tribe that was renowned for knowing times, signs, and seasons when to do things. So why did the witches go there? Because Israel wasn't particularly following God real close at the moment, and whenever a gift is neglected, the counterfeit will move in. And so a gift was being neglected in Endor by Issachar, and the counterfeit moved in. So they found this witch normally called the Witch of Endor, and Saul goes inquires of her. Literally, David is being told one night that he is going to go and fight. Saul is saying, go and find me a witch. The next day, Saul goes to find the Witch of Endor. Meanwhile, David is marching with all of his men in front of all the Philistine generals. And they're at the last, which is an honor. All the weaker tribes go first. The greater, like the Mossad, the Secret Service, the Delta Force, the Rangers, they're all at the very back. All the really great ones come by last. And it's like the final inspiration. It's like the fireworks stand. It's the grand finale. Isn't it strange? In this 24-hour period, about 40 miles apart, David's about to experience something, and Saul is too. The same day. Same time. Saul is being told by Samuel that the witch calls up, and yes, I believe it was Samuel, because he was angry when he came up. Why was he angry? Because here's a righteous man having to obey darkness. You might say, well, why did he have to obey darkness? Because Jesus hadn't come yet. Satan had the keys to death, hell, and the grave, and he would for 1,000 more years until Jesus came and took those keys. And when Jesus came and took those keys, he took everybody who believed in him from Sheol with him to paradise, including the thief beside him on the cross. Well, this is prior to that. So Satan had legal right to Sheol. Everybody who died, he had legal right to control them. And here's a righteous man under the law of that was created, the spiritual law, had to obey what the devil told him to do. See, it wasn't the witch of Endor he had to obey. The devil said, you go up. And Samuel says to him, why are you inquiring me, since the Lord has departed from you? Do you not know that tomorrow you and your son will be with me? Ay, ay, ay. Tomorrow. At the very moment Saul is getting this, David is marching by with the Philistines, getting ready to go fight Saul. And as he goes by, he gets a message too. Because after he marches by, the Philistine generals say, we're not letting David do this. In fact, if he's not out of here by tomorrow morning, we're going to kill him. He's got to be gone by sunrise. Because he will turn against us in the battle. He will turn against us and he will start fighting us, and we will have to fight him and Saul. No, if he's not gone, he's dead. Both of them find out, tomorrow you could be dead. So David, the next morning, gets up before sunrise, and by sunrise, he and his 600 men, the wives and family, are all gone. Back to Ziklag. Saul gets up the next morning, puts on his armor, and 12 hours later would be dead. The archers found him, encircled him, shot him. He realized he's mortally wounded. Before they could come and take him to torture him, he falls on his own sword and kills himself. David is marching to Ziklag, wondering what in the world is going on. My people have forsaken me. My enemies have forsaken me. My friends have forsaken me. My men are upset with me. They're wondering, wait, why are we following this kid? He was supposed to be king. Samuel anointed him to be king, but nothing is happening. Why are we following this kid? All we do is just fight and war, but this is not what we signed up for. And now our enemies don't even want us. Saul's going to win the battle, and we're going to be chased forever. It takes him 3 days to get to Ziklag. 3 days. Probably not a real pleasant 3 days. And when they get there, it's going to get worse. And you know the story. They find Ziklag burned. The women are gone. The children are gone. The animals are gone. The gold's gone. The bronze is gone. The silver's gone. Everything's gone. And it says something very interesting when you pick up this passage in chapter 30. It says this, in verse 6. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him. Now, how do you think David felt? He'd rallied 600 men and their families to him. Everything was great, and now everything is collapsing, and there's nothing he can do. Nothing. Even the people who ran to get him water from the cave of Adullam, to bring back water for him, were now ready to stone him. David was grieving, not just over the loss of his wives and children, but over the loss of his friends. Everything had fallen apart. That's verse 6. And it says this, but David strengthened himself in the Lord, his God. Now it's interesting the timing of this. And it teaches us a principle of seeking God. Because in verse 8, it says, so David inquired of the Lord. But here's my point. He didn't inquire of the Lord first. He strengthened himself first. Why? Why do you need to strengthen yourself before you ask of God? Because you never want to approach God lacking in faith. Never. So how did David strengthen himself? He probably reminded himself of what Samuel had said to him. You're going to be king. He remembered how the Lord had been with him, how he helped him kill the lion with his bare hands, how he helped him kill the bear with his bare hands, how he took one stone and killed Goliath. And he picked up a sword that was taller than he was, probably weighed as much as David weighed, and chopped off Goliath's head with it. And he wrote this in chapter 71 of Psalms, verse 17. O God, you have taught me from my youth, and to this day I declare your wondrous works. You helped me every time I needed help. And he wrote Psalm 75:1. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks for your wondrous works declare your name is near. He remembered what Moses had written. And because he had read it, how God, by his outstretched arm, had taken the children of Israel through the wilderness and through the Red Sea. How all the works that he had done. And he probably, being a fine Jewish boy, reminded himself of the names of God. Because God will act on behalf of his names. He probably went through them and reviewed them in his mind. Because just in the reviewing of who God is, faith is built up. It's inspired. It grows inside of us. He said, Jehovah Sidkenu, the Lord, our righteousness, pure in action, the morally perfect one, is on my side. Jehovah Mishpat, the Lord who is justice, the unbiased, impartial one, is on my side. Jehovah Chesed, the Lord who is merciful, the loving, kind, courteous, overlooking one. Jehovah Makedesh, the Lord who sanctifies, the pure, clean, without stain one. Jehovah Megan, the Lord my shield, the protecting, hiding, overshadowing one. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord my peace, the calm, safe, content, preparing one. Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there, the directive, patient, revealing, disclosing one. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord is healing, the recreating, righteous, restorative one. Jehovah Yireh, the Lord provides, knowing, seeing, giving one. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord my victorious banner, the offensive, advancing one. Jehovah Rohi, the Lord my shepherd, the strong, leading, protecting one. Jehovah Nagad, the Lord who predicts, the omniscient, foretelling one. Jehovah A'avah, the Lord who is love, the patient, kind, gracious, caring, empathetic one. Jehovah Elohim, the Lord is worthy of worship, the glorious, incomparable, all-powerful one. Jehovah Quana, the Lord is jealous, the love-stricken, jealous, angry one on my behalf. The Jehovah Elyon, the Lord supreme, God, deliverer, and possessor of all that exists. Jehovah Olam, the Lord who is eternal, uncaused, self-existent one. Jehovah Hayah, the Lord who is self-sufficient, the great I am, self-sustaining, self-creating one. Jehovah Kadosh, the Lord who is holy, pure, and undefiled, uncompromised one. Jehovah Shaddai, the Lord Almighty, omnipotent, all-powerful, infinite, and strength one. The Jehovah Oar, the Lord who is light, the luminous, glowing, radiant one. Jehovah Kabod, the Lord of weighty glory, the rich, radiant, splendorous one. He is on my side. He is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. He is eternal. He is immutable. He is holy. David remembered God had a plan. God had helped him achieve that plan, and God would not stop that plan now. He remembered what Samuel had prophesied over him. He would be king. He would win the victory over all of his enemies. And David knew God had called him. God had chosen him. He wrote Psalms 139:16. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were written for me, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. In other words, before I was born, you planned this day. I will not fail. Now that David was full of faith, now he was ready to inquire of the Lord. Man. Never inquire of God when your faith is weak. Always strengthen yourself in God before you inquire of him. There's 6 things that God did for David in that 24-hour period. In the exchange of Saul and David, the kingdom shifted. 6 things he did. Sometimes behind the story, there's another story, and behind that story, there's another story. This incredible God that we serve isn't like the mono vision in his ability to help us get to where we're going. Multiple plans and multiple purposes are going on simultaneously, and we don't even know it's taking place. What David was going to find out was that just in a day, he got back. So David inquires of the Lord. And God says, go. And as David is pursuing the Amalekites, he just happens to find a boy in the middle of the desert. Just happens to find him. Isn't that coincidence? No, it's part of the plan. And that boy just happened to get sick 3 days earlier, and the Amalekite left him there, and guess what the Egyptian boy decides he wants to do? I want to tell David where those guys went, because they left me here to die. So I'm going to tell David everything, and David go get them. So he tells them where they're going. David goes after them, and not only receives his wives back and the children back, but incredible amounts of loot. Sheep, cattle, gold. Why? Because he didn't get back just what was in Ziklag. He got back what that raiding party had taken from 10 other cities, which was a lot. But what he was about to find out is that in that 24-hour period where he was being rejected once again and Saul would die in battle, he would find out God protected him. What do you mean God protected him? Yeah. You see, if David had been accepted by Israel, by the Philistines to fight Israel. And by the way, we find out in, what is it? Let me check my notes to make sure I've got it right here. We find out in 1 Chronicles 12:19, there's proof David actually had planned and was going to fight against Israel with the Philistines. So one like imagination here. We find out that God was protecting him. How? Because if David would have fought with the Philistines, at the moment that the archers had surrounded Saul, the Philistine generals would have said this: David, if you're really for us, go kill him. You go kill him. And if you don't kill him, we're killing you right now. Go kill him. And the very thing David had fought not to do, he would have been forced to do. God protected him. But David didn't know it at the time he's going back to Ziklag. He didn't know Saul was going to die in battle. And he didn't know he would have been forced to kill him. So David didn't kill him. And God blessed him. The second thing that God did is that God provided for him. How did he provide for him? Remember, he got all of the plunder from all the raiding party. And guess what that did? That plunder funded David's kingdom for the next 7 years in Hebron. Had he not got that plunder, there'd have been no provision to begin his kingdom. Saul now died. David sets up the kingdom in Hebron, where Abraham was buried. He sets up the kingdom in Hebron, waits there for 7 years while Ishbosheth and all the other generals and stuff are fighting each other and who's going to be the next king. David is just quietly setting up his kingdom in Hebron, and it's funded by the raiding party. So God protected him. God provided for him. God propelled him. Why? Because in the greatest crisis of his life, David turned to God, and God gave him everything he had said he was going to give him. In fact, the men so realized David had God with him that they grew the kingdom. Word spread, and that's how the kingdom actually began, because the word spread of what happened with David, and the people demanded David to be their king. They demanded it. David didn't say, hey, I'm king. The people demanded David to be the king. So God protected, God provided, God propelled, and God produced a crisis that would rally men to David. The incredible thing that happens with crises, they're never pleasant. But boy, do they rally people to a leader, especially when the leader is successful. People go, God is with this man. And people rallied to David from all over the country, from almost every nation that was around. God promoted David because of how he handled the crisis. And God pronounced a kingship on David by giving him favor with the people. And it all came at a very moment when David felt like he was the greatest failure God ever created. Many of you feel that way. You may look at your life and you may think, my life has been very unsuccessful and eventful. In fact, if I stood before God right now, he'd probably say, well, you made it in, barely. The gates closed. By the way, I just want you to know you were the last person to get in. It was that close. But you made it. And then he turns to somebody else and says, well done, good and faithful servants. You barely made it. Everybody else will get the accolades, but not you. But what you don't know is that in every crisis, God is setting you up for incredible success. Unless you don't strengthen yourself in God and you give up. If you give up, David could have just sat in Ziklag and gone, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry you lost your children. I lost mine. I'm sorry you lost your wife. I lost mine. I'm sorry you don't have any animals. I don't either. Listen, I'm sorry, guys. He could have done that. But he didn't. And that's the real story for you. What are you going to do with your crisis? You may lose your job. What are you going to do with your crisis? You may have a financial problem. What are you going to do with your crisis? You may have relatives. What are you going to do with your crisis? You can quit. You can give up. You can let it remain the same. But what are you going to do? Every one of us have crisis. God intentionally allows crisis to come. Sometimes crises are hard, like war. Sometimes crises are hard, like companies going out of business. Sometimes crises are hard, like 9/11, and towers come down that you never thought would come down. Sometimes crises are hard, like Greg and Melissa losing a child. Whatever the crisis is, there is a greater victory that lies ahead than the crisis we're going through. Doesn't make the crisis pleasant. Doesn't make the crisis good. Doesn't make the crisis fun. But God, in his eternal wisdom, says to us, this crisis has not gone unnoticed, and I will repay. We have to look at him. We have to keep our eyes on him. We may not understand. I tell my staff, I don't pretend to understand God. Once in a while, I think I got it, and half of that time I'm wrong. But I do know this. I may not understand God, but I trust him. I trust him. I don't know why he does what he does, but I trust him. I know that my God rules and reigns, and that he is good. And when I stand before him, I'm going to go, wow, it was worth it. It was worth it. Then I'll guarantee you, their son is saying, already, it's worth it. He knows stuff that Greg and Melissa don't know yet. He sees plans they don't see yet. The only thing he's sad about is that they may be sad. He hurts for his mom and dad, probably. But he sees a plan that is so divine in nature. If you can grasp that, it won't make your crisis any fun, but it will tell you something is ahead that God is going to use. I'm going to have greater influence than I've ever had. People are going to come to know God that never would have known him. Satan is going to be defeated in ways he would have never been defeated. God's kingdom is going to be advanced, going to be propelled. Everything is going to happen, and I am going to be an example of God, action in the land of the living. So, Father, may your name be glorified in everything and in every way. We say to you, you are our God. Every one of your names is who you are. We cannot separate your action from your name because you are the action your name says. You will act on behalf of your people. And you will act on behalf of this church. You will act on behalf of Greg and Melissa and their family. We know this. We don't pretend to understand it, but we know it. And we strengthen ourselves in you, O God, and call upon your name. Defend your name in this church. Defend your name in this people. Defend your name with Greg and Melissa. Defend your name, Lord God Almighty. We call upon you. We know you will hear, you will act, you'll respond, and the kingdom will be advanced, and every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Amen. So be it. Like the nucleus of an atom. And then it's interesting because in the nucleus there are 3 protons. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's interesting how that works, isn't it? So everything is made up of this atomic structure. God says, and Paul says in Romans 1, all of creation speaks about him and we are without excuse. Now, whether you go to the smallest thing that the eye can't see except through an electron microscope, or you go to the largest thing that is so far away we don't even know that there are suns out there 100,000 times bigger than our sun. I mean, it's huge, from the largest to the smallest. God has created this thing called a negative and positive charge. It doesn't mean value. Negative is not a value statement. It's a charge statement. And so your clothes are held together, for example, and you're glad they are, but your clothes are held together because an atom created a negative charge that attracted a positive charge, and that's what causes the fabric to stay, the thread to stay together, the chair you're sitting on to hold you up, the paper you write on to receive the ink, because a negative charge attracted two or more positive charges. It's that way in all of creation. It's built in the fabric of heaven, and it works that way. And how does that work? Because whenever I give, I create a negative charge that attracts positive charges to me. In fact, everything in the Bible is about this. The Beatitudes, and he brings that mystery back to his classroom, warehouse, library. And from that warehouse library, he's teaching his class what the mystery he discovered in there. So we'll be talking about, we already filmed the first season, and one of the topics is time. And how does time work? And where is God in time, or is he in time? And justice, and how does God's justice work for us? And why can we expect God's justice to work? The mystery of, like talked a little bit last night, the mystery of prophets and psychics, and what's the differentiation between those two, and the law of attraction, and there's difference between God's law of attraction and the New Age law of attraction, and how does that work? Did you know that everything in God's kingdom works by creating a negative charge to attract two or more positive charges? Everything. Let me just this is not my message, but if you give me like 2 minutes and 18 seconds. God created into creation the atom. The very fabric of creation is the atomic structure. When I was standing in the throne room on May 12, 1995, I was standing there about 8 feet from the throne, and all the whirling going on around me, angels rotating around the throne of God, and I'm thinking, I am standing in the nucleus of an atom. The throne room is literally okay. Oh, there we yeah, I could never live up to that introduction. So I'm going, who is that guy? I'm thrilled to be here. I've really this is my second time here, but already I have a great fondness for Greg and Melissa and what's going on here. And yeah. There's a genuineness about them that I don't always see. Sometimes we preachers, we feel like we have to put on our glory face and make everybody think our life is perfect, so they want to, it's like, if you want to get deeper into God, believe your life is that. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall receive. Blessed are those, you give away mercy, you receive mercy. Everything in the Bible is about you humble yourself, God exalts you. Everything is create a negative charge, God will give you more. Job 42:10. Job has gone through, 41 chapters of illness, however long that took. 41 chapters of illness. He's been praying for himself, beseeching God for himself. Then he realizes in Job 42:10, it says this, and God acted on the behalf of Job when Job prayed for his friends. Job created a negative charge. I'm going to quit praying for me. I'm going to pray for my friends. And guess what? God says, really? I'll act on your behalf. You give away something God brings to you. So the law of sowing and reaping is part of that negative charge. The seed faith. Yes, it's true. But here, let me give you a little hint, though. For example, Jesus said, when you fast, don't shout it from the rooftop. Don't disfigure your face like the Pharisees do, for they have received the reward. What does that mean? It means this. I created a negative, but I just got my positive because I let people know what I was doing, and they said, "Oh, look, this is perfect," and you'll go deeper in God. But the reality is the deeper in God you get, the enemy doesn't just step back and go, "Oh, you're anointed now." Man, okay, demons back off. He's anointed, so. No, the opposite is true. As you get deeper into the Lord, the enemy raises up a battle, and he plays right into God's hands because it makes you stronger. And the enemy, I don't know, you'd think after a few millennia he would recognize this. That if I attack God's people, it makes them stronger. But he didn't get it at the beginning, and I don't think he's going to get it at the end either. So this is how it works. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very impressed with your pastors, and on multiple levels, multiple levels. I'll leave it at that. Some of you may know that we're beginning I'm actually beginning a TV program. We're waiting on Daystar to give us the final date, but it looks like we'll be in October. And the program is called Dreams and Mysteries. So think in terms of Indiana Jones goes out to his journeys, and he discovers a mystery of the Bible.